Progressive VOX site says we should eliminate grades to do away with competition in the schools. Maybe that's why progressives are stealing elections, to simply get rid of the competition. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show. This is the only program out there that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we start with stress on the campus as left-wing media outlet VOX makes the case to eliminate college GPAs to end what they call competitive environments. And now you see what's going on. Now that the Democrats have power, notice how we did a show about something like this yesterday. Now that the Democrats have power, look at what they're calling for, a radical agenda. And what is the problem with schools to the left? It's not that they can't teach our kids reading and writing. That's a feature, not a bug. Keep them ignorant, keep them dependent. What's really bothering the left now is competition. See, when you give kids grades, by definition, they're in competition with each other, right? When you give kids grades, that means everybody's not going to get the same grade. And so what you're doing is you're using the public schools to advance a narrative that competition is important. It's not. Competition is the problem. We don't need kids struggling with one another. We don't need kids trying to outdo each other. What we do need is a world where everybody gets the same thing. That the teacher's not paid less than the basketball player, that the doctor doesn't make more money than the ditch digger. All of this competition is killing us. And have we gotten to the point yet where you have figured out that this is really about socialism, that it is inclusion? Have you figured that out? Do I have to keep making sarcastic references?
Well, you're going to make sarcastic references no matter what happens. But what they don't understand is this isn't like, unless it's every single thing we ever do in college, this is not true, is graded on a curve. All you have to do is your work and study, and you can get that A. It doesn't mean that Billy over there can't get an A too. Everyone can get an A, but you got to put in some work, and we can't have that here in this country right now because grades are training our students for a lifetime of capitalist service, according to our little writer over at VOX named My Tran.
And let me just throw this out there. Yeah, a slight disagreement. I know what you meant. Not everybody can get A's. I'm not getting an A in math no matter what I do.
I said if you put in the work and you study, you too can.
Yes, but it depends. There are people are not the same, and this is where I'm rejecting VOX. The left's entire argument is that everybody is exactly the same, because that's the socialist argument. That everyone is exactly the same, which means that everybody has the capacity to do everything the same way. That is not true. Women do not have the capacity to do the kind of heavy lifting, generally speaking, that men do. Men do not have the capacity to do to endure the kind of long-term suffering that women do. There's just differences in the male and the female. And there are differences, too, among individual students. My point is that not everybody's good at everything. That's okay. It's okay to get a B in math, but bust your butt and get a B in math if you're not good at it. It's okay if you're not a good writer to get a B instead of an A in a writing class. What these guys are trying to argue is everybody's the same. We are not individuals made in the image of a god. We are simply evolutionary creatures. And so as evolutionary animals, we shouldn't compete, which is ironic. Because what is the one main function of biological nature?
Survive.
If you survive, which is compete, right? So get rid of God and get rid of all of that stuff and keep telling kids that we're nothing more than highly evolved animals, and then take a look at Mother Nature. What's the system Mother Nature created? A system of evolution and conflict. A system, my friends, of competition.
All right. Well, My Tran, in this article for VOX, is actually highlighting a TikTok video. Do you know what TikTok is? If you're on it, you better not be.
China.
TikTok video done by Daria Nuri. And Tran is calling this a PSA to the high schoolers.
Yes.
So in the video, Nuri's complaining that she studied round the clock in high school to get good grades, including taking many advanced placement courses, and she never did anything fun. So the video then shows someone she referred to as this MF with his middle finger in the air, and she says that he had beef with every teacher and dropped his only club and had fun. Okay? So she's the nerd over here studying and getting good grades and not having fun.
Well,
and this MFer it had beef and whatever.
And look, the girl who busted her butt to get grades and to succeed, she's actually jealous of the kid who did nothing. What kind of culture? This has nothing to do with intrinsic value. It has everything to do with the fact that we're telling little African American kids that work and success is not enough. That's not enough to make you a whole person, and that you envy people who do nothing.
So Nuri's big complaint here is that we ended up at the same college. Don't be me. Go have fun. So that's a PSA to the high schoolers, according to our friend Tran at VOX, who sent out this article. That's what they write about over on VOX. Anyway, Tran wrote that Nuri's video demonstrates a growing culture among many students. They should be working hard. She says this culture has developed in part because of the way so many schools in the United States foster gatekeeping and competitive environments. But she questions what should young people do with the feeling of unfairness they experience when they see peers who worked less gain entry to the same prestigious colleges and universities.
Do they
ignore them? Go off and live your own life. But that's all it is.
How completely unlogical this is. So you're mad at the universities because they've adopted left-wing inclusionary policies. Universities have adopted policies that ignore your achievement, Nuri. Nuri, you're mad at the universities. You're mad at the universities because they're letting kids in who didn't work as hard as you. I guarantee you, Nuri, if I sat you down and said, as a good little leftist thinker, do you believe that everybody has the ability and the right to go to college? You'd say, yes. Yes, sir. Everybody must be able to go. Well, then here you are, a walking hypocrisy. Because here you worked hard by your own explanation. You worked hard. You busted your butt. You did the right thing. And you got into college. But then so did the slacker loser wise asses that did nothing, got in. You would think somewhere in that highly educated brain of yours, the contradiction between the reality of progressivism and what it does would dawn on you. And if it doesn't, maybe you didn't study hard enough for those grades. Maybe your grades were inflated to help your sorry butt to get into college too. That's a possibility, isn't it, Nuri?
Well, what's fascinating too is Tran's theory for the Vox article is that the education system is just another arm of capitalism, and grading is a shallow method of evaluating students. So if she's going off of Nuri's video, which showed the girl who worked so hard and then the guy who didn't work so hard, presumably if they're saying we need to get rid of grades, that means that the universities are using the grades, ergo that the MFer must have gotten decent enough grades to then
which also
get
tells
into
you
the university.
Maybe the Emmer effer who was partying all the time, maybe he was naturally gifted.
That's the thing. And so
that's just not okay.
They also say that, we need to get rid of the SATs and ACTs because that's competitive. Again, study, you do have the potential. I believe you have the potential. Maybe you don't score perfect, but you can score high enough for these universities to get in. So you don't need to completely wash it out just because the MFers at the bottom who have beefs with everyone and don't want to study, just because they won't necessarily get in. It doesn't mean you can't.
Look at her attitude. Her attitude is she cannot enjoy her own success.
Nuri.
Okay. Is it a she?
Nuri.
Yeah. Nuri. Nuri cannot enjoy her own success unless she measures it about somebody. So it's not fair that she succeeded by working hard and he didn't. Fairness to Nuri is I worked hard, I deserve it. He didn't, he doesn't. And then the other thing that I want to call into question here is Vox's answer. Vox's answer to this is that whether their entire premise is everybody should go to college without competition. Everybody should get everything else has with having to work for it. So the premise of Vox is that Nuri's wrong.
Yeah.
Nuri would have been better off learning and doing nothing and getting in the same way the MRFer did.
Yep.
That to Vox is a more fair system. That actually, if you look at it, it encourages all kids to do the littlest possible to make sure the least qualified gets in. That's inclusion, as the left uses it. Everybody goes. So what you're basically telling people, Vox, is every student in the name of fairness should do nothing, to achieve nothing, learn nothing, study nothing, and get the 0, 0, 0, like Bluto Blutarski from Animal House. Mr. Blutarski, your grade average for the semester, 0.00. If that movie were made today, Blutarski would say yes, which means I am most in need of inclusion, not expulsion, Dean Vermeer.
our friends over at Campus Reform have struck again. This time, they went to the University of Missouri in Columbia, Missouri, and they're facing calls at the university to remove Thomas Jefferson's monument from the campus because we all know Thomas Jefferson, horrible bad man. And so the university decided we need to protect this little monument they have. And so they spent $20,000, taxpayer money, I'm sure, to put up an acrylic casing to protect said monument. And Campus Reform, Aaron Moser, said, you know what? How do you feel about this statue?
We're here at the University of Missouri, where the administration has paid $20,000 to put up acrylic casing here around the Thomas Jefferson tombstone. When you walk by the tombstone and statue, do they bother you at all? Do you have any feelings about it?
Well, Thomas Jefferson was a racist and a rapist, so I think it's interesting that the administration is deciding to buckle down by, putting the casing around it, paying for security cameras, etc. I think if other people have so many issues with it, I think it's wrong for MU to keep them, and I do see the reason that people are upset with it.
It feels like we romanticize our founding fathers a lot to be these great people when they held a lot of social standards that would not be correct today.
I don't know if it's worth having like a statue on a school where like racism and diversity and stuff is already a huge problem.
At the end of the day, I don't think we should listen to mob rule or people just thinking that their perception through a 21st century lens of historical figures should dictate exactly what we should or should not have be propped up on campus.
And who is the only voice of reason in the entire video? The young man who said, look, it doesn't matter whether I like Thomas Jefferson or not. What matters is I don't believe we should look through the bubble of social justice, our notions of social justice, to judge somebody lived hundreds of years before it. He's exactly right. Because what these young women don't realize, that there are almost no female heroes from the past who would be left standing. Your precious Margaret Sanger, her statues would and ought to be torn down with all the vehemence of Jefferson's.
The comments that were made overall are the fact that they don't understand their history at all. Because the girl who spewed the Thomas Jefferson is a racist and a rapist. If he would have followed up, I think he should have followed up, and maybe he did, but just didn't tape it. Was he anything else? A president, a founding father, creator of a university, anything else?
Thanks to the way we teach,
a writer, anything. No, that's all we know.
Well, thanks to the way we teach feminism on college campuses, men are rapists.
This is true.
Right? Even men who haven't raped participate in rape culture. And certainly the way we teach racial theory on college campuses is you don't have to be an actual racist to be a racist. So she's not only ticking boxes, she's replaced ideology with anything like a command of facts or understanding of history. And this idea that the single young woman in the middle of the groups who said, if this many people don't like something, we ought to get rid of it. I mean, think about the level of that. Just because a lot of people don't like something, we have to get rid of it. There's a lot. I'll bet you more kids on that campus don't like math than like it. Would love to see all mandatory math classes removed from your graduation requirements. Is that a reason to do it? Evidently, to our little geniuses, yes.
In case you were unaware, the British are weird people over there across the pond. At the British Library, they have decided that they now must add George Orwell, Lord Byron, and Ted Hughes to the shame list. Dubious list of shame. Because they have somehow, some way, been linked to slavery. Let me explain. We'll start with George Orwell, who is also Eric Arthur Blair, in case you didn't know. That's his real name. He had a great-grandfather who owned slaves in the Caribbean. And so now George Orwell has to be put on the list of shame because his great-grandfather once owned slaves. And this is the British Library.
Yep.
Just so everyone's aware.
And so what they're doing now is full-blown National Socialism, is full-blown communism. You're guilty even if your parents did it. Your great-grandparents were capitalists.
Grandparents.
If your great-grandparents were capitalists, you were on the bad list, right?
And the thing is, according to the Telegraph, I guess the great-grandfather's fortune was long gone by the time it obviously got to Orwell.
Orwell was not a rich man.
Yes. And so you got to remember, again, British Library, publicly funded, national library, largest in the world, explained their list. And I'll get to the details of the other guys. But they said some items now at the British Library, previously owned by particular named figures cited on these pages, are associated with wealth obtained from enslaved people or through colonial violence. And that curators in the Printed Heritage Collections team have undertaken some research to identify these as part of ongoing work to interpret and document the provenance and history of the printed collections under our care.
Wealth. And I think you slip of the tongue there. Wealth. If you're pushing for a communist system, if you're engaging in this kind of rewriting of history in a socialist way, it's not just wealth taken from slaves. It's the assumption that all wealth was taken from needy people, right? And so that's the larger underlying intent of this. In 20 years, if nothing changes, we're going to talk about anybody who had rich great-grandparents. Even in an all-white country, they're guilty of the same thing. That's where this is moving.
Well, and the Brits here, at the British Library, they've set a goal to be actively anti-racist organization. They want to be an actively anti-racist organization, and this is in response to what's happening in America with the Black Lives Matter movement. Okay, we're in Britain here, in England specifically, but they're trying to be anti-racist because of what Americans are doing.
Yep.
Okay, anyway.
Well, go back to the scene we just saw, the segment we just did about the Jefferson Memorial on Missouri campus, right? Notice the difference. There's not a single lick of difference between what those librarians said and those young girls said. Not a lick. If these people are perceived as offensive or are related to offensive people, they have to go. No question. So tearing down a monument to Thomas Jefferson and banning books from shelves are exactly the same remedy for the same problem.
All right, and as I teased, let's talk about why some of the other guys are on the list. And Oscar Wilde is also on the list. Ted Hughes was born in 1930, and he was added because his ancestor, Nicholas Ferrar, was born in 1592. Okay, so 1930, 1592. Nicholas, had been involved in settling the first British colonies in North America hundreds of years because it was 1930 when Ted Hughes was born, but then 1592 is when the settling happened. So, of course.
So, seriously, Ted Hughes he's gets the scarlet, what letter would it be? Scarlet A, not for adulterer, but for ass. Right? So he gets the Scarlet A for ass.
R.
And the irony here is the fact that Ted Hughes, they got to go back 400 years to an ancestor who participated in creating injustice in slavery. 400 years they go back to give this guy the Scarlet A, right? When the feminists could have just done it. The way he mistreated Sylvia Plath, that's not good enough. You got to go back 400 years to find something you can use?
Yep. Well, with Lord Byron, he was added because of a slave-owning great-grandfather as well. Just like it's the great-grandfathers who are getting these boys in trouble, as well as a slave-owning uncle by marriage.
So by marriage. So you're guilty. So now you're guilty of your wife's family's problems too, right? Now you marry somebody.
I'm going to stop him now because I feel like he's going to go down a talking about the wife's family. I don't want to get you in trouble here. It's time for some real education. As I Please was a series of articles written between 1943 and 1947 for the British newspaper Tribune by author and journalist George Orwell. On resigning from his job at the BBC in November 1943, Orwell joined Tribune as literary editor. Over the next 3.5 years, he wrote a series of columns under the title As I Please, that remain some of the greatest examples of their genre in the English language.
I specifically brought George Orwell today when we just saw that ridiculous story that according to the British Library, George Orwell has to be disqualified or at least trigger warned because he had a great-grandfather who was a slave owner. This is how bad the communist witch hunt on the left has gotten. A great writer like Orwell is now suspect because of what his great-grandfather did. I want to read you just one sentence from one of his As I Like It columns. That's all, just one sentence. and see if it applies to everything you heard today on the show. The really frightening thing about totalitarianism is not that it commits atrocities, but that it attacks the concept of objective truth. It claims to control the past as well as the future. So, George, you had a great-grandfather who held slaves. You must be canceled. And George, it's not just the past that the left controls, the totalitarians. It controls the future. We will diminish access to your books the way Twitter is diminishing access to news if it doesn't fit the paradigm. Go back one last time. The real frightening thing about totalitarianism is that it claims to control the past as well as the future. Welcome to your future under socialism.
All right, before we go, just a reminder that the best way to keep up with our various shows here at Freedom Project is to follow us on Parler. So take a few moments, follow at Dupesta, at Katie, and at Freedom Project. Now, we want to take a moment to show a little love for our Patriot Club members. They keep the show going. So today, we're going to give a shout out to Jennifer from Summers Point, New Jersey. Jennifer, thank you for supporting us. And if you're a fan of this show, please consider a one-time tax-deductible donation to support our Patriot Club and maybe get a shout-out yourself. And we're going to also send you an awesome tumbler. All you have to do to sign up is visit patriotclub.us. That's patriotclub.us. Now, as always, we're wrapping things up with the fun fact of the day. In 1 millisecond, a flea can jump about 3 inches. Its ability to accelerate that quickly is faster acceleration than the space shuttle. So a flea is faster than the space shuttle.
Jennifer, thanks for supporting the show. This slurp is for you. And that's going to do it for the show. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, keep on slurping, my friends.